for the debate. I recognize the member from Haldimand-Norfolk.
Thank you, Speaker. I am pleased to be responding to Bill 68 today, and while I support its title, A Plan to Protect Ontario, I don't see much in the bill that will address the many issues that I continually hear from my constituents in Haldimand-Norfolk. And once again, I see many missed opportunities by this government. There is no doubt that families in my riding and right across this province, they're suffering. And I don't see this government addressing key issues like affordability for families. I don't see this government addressing unemployment, especially for our young people, like we've heard this afternoon, who tell me that they don't see a future in this province for themselves. Instead, once again, we see the prioritization of developers and private interests. And while this government and its education minister tinker with education by going after what I call the low-hanging fruit, I don't see a concrete action plan for the public services like education and health care. As usual, there's a lot that looks good on paper and makes for tasty government sound bites, but we don't see investments that make sense for our businesses and industry. Lots of talk about protecting steel workers, but the steel workers at Nanticoke and my riding don't feel they are included in that statement. There were some good things in the fall economic statement for the business community, as the member from Thornhill alluded to, namely the $30 billion tariff relief package and the return of the WSIB surplus funds to eligible employers. But this government could have taken further steps, like lowering the small business tax rate from 3.2% to 2% and raising the threshold to access that rate from $500,000 to at least $700,000 and then indexing it to inflation. A missed opportunity. The minister could have also raised the employer health tax exemption threshold from $1 million to $2.25 million to match Manitoba and index it to inflation as well. Another missed opportunity for this government and for our business community. Missed opportunities like these make it harder for our businesses to hire more of our young people, hire more staff, expand operations, and keep prices affordable for their customers. $400 million through the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund to help rural and small communities build vital infrastructure. That includes roads and bridges. And I'm sure you are all tired of me talking by now about the Argyle Street Bridge in Caledonia. It sits waiting for this government to take action, and we aren't sure why this government doesn't take action. A woman was actually kicked out of her home, the Toll House, where she also operated a home-based business. She was kicked out in 2019, Speaker. This government kicked a woman out of her home in anticipation of the bridge being reconstructed. It's now 2025, crickets. This poor woman could still be in her home because nothing is happening with respect to the reconstruction of the bridge. And yet, the Minister of Transportation, the Finance Minister, they stand up and they boast that they are getting shovels in the ground. They are building roads, bridges, and whatever else. It seems to be a fable, though, in my riding. What are they waiting for? A national headline? This bridge was deemed in a state of deterioration many years ago. This is the government of the day, and they've got to get it done. So continuing to boast about pledging money to build and not building doesn't quite cut it for the people in my riding. And it's the same story with long-term care. On one hand, this government says they are working to keep people in their own homes longer. That seems like a really nice thought, and it is, if the supports actually existed to keep people in their own homes. But they don't exist. $2.1 billion to long-term care new builds. That reads great in a headline. It sounds good on the 6 o'clock news, but the truth is long-term care is not being built in this province. The planned 64-bed expansion at Edgewater Gardens in Dunnville in my riding has been paused indefinitely due to a funding shortfall. The project has not been built, and the current provincial funding level is considered inadequate to cover the construction costs. In March 2021, the Ontario government announced that Edgewater Gardens was allocated 64 new long-term care spaces as part of a plan to create a 128-bed home in a new build. Last year, though, the expansion project was paused before construction had ever begun. The home's management cited that the current construction costs exceed the amount of provincial funding approved at that time. Administration and my office have gone through the proper channels to attempt to resolve this funding shortfall because we desperately need these beds. No answers, no support, no beds. And the same is true down the road in Norfolk County, in Port Dover, where the community was told a new facility would be built. Dover Cliffs was set to grow from 70 beds to 128, and I've recently learned that there will be no expansion anytime soon because the new owners of Dover Cliff, they're prioritizing other projects. Where is the accountability for the community? Is there no process, no timeline for these operators to be held accountable? This is why this government, with smiles on their faces, talk about keeping people in their own homes. They have to keep them in their own homes because long-term care homes are not being built. Back in 2023, the Convenient Care at Home Act was before Finance Committee, hundreds of amendments, none of which were adopted. I brought forward one that I thought was the most significant to fixing home care in this province, and that was to ensure the wages of all those working for client providers would be paid comparable to those doing the same work within long-term care or in hospital settings. And here we are 2 years later, Speaker, and the sector is nowhere on the path to recovery. A tree cannot stand if its roots are rotten. The roots, Speaker, are the workers. So we can throw another $1.1 billion over the next 3 years to expand home and community care services, supposedly to increase home care values and ease pressures on our emergency departments, but I can tell you for free, it will not work. It sounds good, but it will not work. It won't work until those working in the community are treated and compensated the same as those doing comparable work in our healthcare institutions. This government is continuing to throw good money after bad, so it's no wonder we keep kicking the can down the road when it comes to balancing the books and thus making it more and more difficult for families in this province. Last week, the nurse practitioners were here at Queen's Park, and I know they get a lot of lip service when they come. Why aren't we putting our nurse practitioners to work to their fullest scope? When is this government going to admit that nurse practitioners can easily provide relief to a strained healthcare system by expanding primary care access, managing a wider range of patient needs, and helping to address doctor shortages? Everyone knows this needs to be done, so why isn't the government getting the job done? And the member from Eglinton Lawrence was boasting about crime and border security. My riding of Haldimand-Norfolk is ground zero for contraband tobacco, on par with places like El Salvador. We know tobacco is one of the most commonly illegally traded goods in the world. In Canada, about 6 billion contraband cigarettes are sold each and every year. In the spring 2019 budget, this government was set to take aim at the contraband problem, but we've allowed it to flourish in this province, which has created problems for many other provinces across the country. We are to blame. Anyway, spring 2019 budget, we were to adopt Quebec's model, which has seen contraband incidents drop to about 12%. And just before the budget went to print, it was pulled. Interesting, to say the least. So you can imagine my disappointment that contraband was not included in the fall economic statement, and I'm hoping for better in the spring budget. And just to paint the picture, Ontario has 8 or 9 full-time officers working on the file, and we are spending about $3.8 million on the illicit program. By contrast, Quebec spends about $15 million with about 60 full-time officers. This is why their incident rates sit around 12%, and ours here in Ontario hovers around 50% or higher. Legitimate businesses like corner stores are impacted, and unfortunately, contraband tobacco is a threat to public safety because the illegal market is fueled by organized crime, who are also in the business of drugs, guns, and human trafficking. I've worked on the contraband file for over 25 years, and despite all of the intelligence we have, the problem has only worsened in this province, where government seems to turn a blind eye. By not addressing the contraband problem in this province, there is a loss of about $750 million in tax revenue, and I would suggest this government use some of its revenue from the tobacco lawsuit, which rings in at about $7.1 billion, to increase enforcement so we can recoup this $750 million in lost tax revenue. Speaker, last but certainly not least, nothing new on the agriculture file in the fall economic statement. This government talks about tariff-proofing Ontario, and I maintain one of the best ways to do that is to invest in our farm families and to expand agriculture food processing. Keeping processing local for, say, things like beef and pork reduces immediate tariff exposure and gives Ontario more bargaining room and domestic market resilience. I am sure all of the members present this afternoon have heard the past few days from some of our top ag organizations hosting their lobby days that we need to make these investments. And while this government waited until a day or two before the 2025 winter election was to be called, a $100 million boost to RMP has become too little, too late for farm families. Speaker, the fall economic statement is nothing dynamic nor damaging, but I think this government...
Question. I recognize the member from Windsor-Tecumseh.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the member from Haldimand-Norfolk for her remarks. And I know there are a lot of... I've had the pleasure of going to the members' riding a few times over the years. It feels like home in many ways. So I know that there are pockets of industry, pockets of smaller communities that have a factory or manufacturer. And part of the bill includes the expansion of the Ontario Made Manufacturing Investment Tax Credit, or the OMM-ITC for short. And so in the past, some of the economic development programs have supported the reshoring of work from the purchase of equipment. And this tax credit expands that opportunity to purchase equipment that will allow for us to repatriate some business and drive innovation. So my question to the member opposite is whether she's in support of practical targeted relief for small businesses like the manufacturers in her riding.
Question.
And when they, especially during these unprecedented global challenges.
Thanks, Speaker, and I appreciate the question from the member opposite, and I will support items that actually help industry and small business or business of any size in my riding of Haldimand-Norfolk. But what we've found in the past is that many of the programs offered, you have to jump through hoops to actually qualify for some of these programs, and industry and businesses tell me that while they look good on paper, they don't qualify because they're not big enough, or they don't qualify for A, B, or C. So I'm hoping that this is all good news for everyone in my riding. I will add, one of the things that I am regretful for is the support of my steelworkers out at Nanticoke. This government continually talks about supporting steelworkers in this province, and yet my steelworkers don't feel it, largely because there's an MZO on the table right here at Queen's Park that is impeding business, or can impede business, at the Nanticoke Industrial Park, and I would hope...
Question. I recognize the member from Niagara Centre.
Well, thank you, Speaker, and thank you to my friend from Haldimand-Norfolk for her presentation, and beautiful part of the province. Sorry to hear that there's such a difficulty in getting things done by this government in the riding. I can relate. Does she think that it's due to the fact that they're not paying attention to the riding, or because you keep defeating them in every election that you run in?
Response.
Well, I would hope that the safety, and I appreciate the question, but I would hope that the safety of the people of Haldimand-Norfolk would not be played politics with. Safety should never, ever be jeopardized because somebody is playing politics with a riding and its member. It is disheartening. We have asked for meetings at Roma, at AMO, to meet with the Minister of Transportation on some very significant transportation issues, not only the Caledonia Bridge, but we've got a very dangerous situation at Haldibrook Road and Highway 6 in Caledonia, just a few miles down from the bridge. And we have to chase the minister down in hallways at AMO or Roma in order to try and get a response. And just sit with us at the table, tell us what the holdup is, and maybe we would be sympathetic, but it doesn't happen. So I would hope that politics is not being played with the people of Haldimand-Norfolk because of who they chose.
Question. I recognize the member from Beaches, East York.
Thank you very much to the member of Haldimand-Norfolk. Speaker, and to the member of Haldimand-Norfolk. I know your area because I went down to visit you this summer, and it's gorgeous, Lake Erie. Beautiful place to live and work and play and swim. And I know how well loved you are, and all of us should know that because you, I believe, like the last election, you won by 21,000 votes, and it's the first ever in the history of Canada for an independent to get re-elected, to be elected twice. So people do love you. And I hear you talk about the Argyle Bridge, the abandoned gas wells, jobs, all the time. Your passion for your community shows. what would you have expected to see in this fall economic statement?
Once.
Thank you very much for the question. And I don't know how I'll fit my head through the door after that. But anyway, I would have expected, the member from Orleans was talking about support for our young people. And I think, largely a lot of us do this job because we want a better future for our young people. And there are a lot of missed opportunities, as I spoke about in my 10 minutes. But I continually hear about our young people facing unprecedented challenges, mental health struggles rising each and every day, driven by rapid changes in technology, the isolation of government-mandated lockdowns during the pandemic, and the overwhelming pressures of growing up in an uncertain world. And instead of addressing these issues head on, this government leaves some of our agencies and our societies hanging with saying, hey, we're going to make you wait until year end in order to give you more funding. There's no proactive planning in this province for some of the agencies taking care of our most vulnerable people.
Question. I recognize the member from Ottawa West Nepean.
Thank you, Speaker. Earlier today, we saw the government push through a bill that takes away the rights of communities like yours to have a say in their local schools, despite the fact that students and teachers and education workers were here just yesterday saying that the real challenges that they need to be addressed in schools is things like the lack of funding for
Pursuant to Standing Order 50C, I am now required to interrupt the proceedings and announce that there have been 6.5 hours of debate on the motion for second reading of this bill. This debate will therefore be deemed adjourned unless the Government House Leader directs the debate to continue.
Speaker, please continue the debate.
Continue.
So what teachers and education workers and students were saying is that they actually need funding for mental health supports and for more EAs to ensure that there are safe schools. But this fall economic statement didn't add a single penny to our schools. Does the member from Haldimand-Norfolk think that a government that was actually concerned about the well-being of our kids would have invested in mental health and more caring adults in our schools? Response.
Thank you very much. And I actually spoke about this 2 weeks ago. I believe that this government, I'll first say that the one thing in Bill 33 that I can condone is merit-based decision-making, but this government should take its own policy and apply it everywhere where they are making decisions, appointments and different boards. But I think we are going after low-hanging fruit with respect to education. I don't think that the majority of members across the way understand what is really transpiring in classrooms across this province. They are in chaos. I get calls from parents. I get calls from EAs and educators all the time. Schools are out of control, and I don't see anything that we are doing in this House that will actually improve the outcomes for students and for educators and families in this province.
I recognize the member from Beaches, East York.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And, we learn a lot about each other's ridings when the members get up and speak in the chamber. And we've heard so much. Since 2022, I've heard you almost every other day speak about the Argyle Bridge and how dangerous it is and how you're worried about the safety of your residents. And now I'm hearing about a woman who was displaced from her home near it. So I'm wondering if you can tell me why you think this government is dragging their heels on repairing something that is so vital for the safety of Haldimand-Norfolk.
Response.
Thank you, Speaker. And I wish I could hear what the member opposite's talking about, the mayor of Norfolk County. Anyway, the people of Haldimand County feel very abandoned by this government with respect to the Argyle Street Bridge. And the lady who was kicked out of her home continually comes to my Facebook page and asks why she would have been kicked out of her home when this government was so concerned about that bridge in 2019 to kick her out of her home. And here we are, 2025, and not one bit of work has been done on that bridge. The only work that's actually being done is the MTO monitoring it to make sure that we can still send vehicles over it safely. So it's shut down a few times a year or a few times a month sometimes for the ministry to actually deem it safe so that we can send traffic across it. That is not comforting to the people who are traveling across that bridge, especially with their kids in the back seat.
Question. I recognize the member for Eglinton and Lawrence.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the member of Haldimand-Norfolk. So this is the fall economic statement, and we're talking about the entire province of Ontario. All I have sat here and heard is about her own riding and what she can do. So tell me what, in your opinion, what you would do to get economic prosperity.
Question.
Speaker.
Response.
Well, if the member in front of me here doesn't understand that our work here actually has to do with our communities, good luck being re-elected next time, is all I say. I stand here in this House and I fight for the people of Haldimand-Norfolk because they're the ones who sent me here. But I also know that the issues in Haldimand-Norfolk are not unique to Haldimand-Norfolk.